Okay, deep divers, get ready, because we're about to take a deep dive into a world that's, well, usually invisible to us. A world absolutely teeming with microorganisms. And you've always been curious about this kind of stuff. And honestly, after taking a look at everything you sent over, I got to say, I am too.
It's pretty amazing when you think about it, right? These tiny little life forms, totally invisible to us, having this, well, huge impact on, us, the planet, everything.
Yeah, it's like we're talking about these microscopic things that can totally change entire ecosystems, affect our health, even like determine what we eat.
Exactly.
And speaking of what we eat, we're diving deep today into Chapter 2 of Microorganisms, Friend and Foe.
Ooh, I like that title.
Right, Friend and Foe. Kind of says it all, don't you think?
Absolutely. That's the heart of it, really. They're crucial for life, but they can also cause some serious problems.
It's like, I don't know, having a roommate who's like your best friend, but also sometimes your worst enemy, all at the same time.
Right.
Okay, but before we get into all that, let's, set the scene a little bit. So imagine this. We're shrinking down. Smaller, 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 way smaller than the head of a pin. Like, we're in a world now where even a drop of water is like an ocean to us. And a speck of dust, that's a mountain. This is the world of microorganisms.
Whoa. Yeah, it really makes you think about, what even is big or small, doesn't it?
Totally.
And this microscopic world, it's incredibly diverse. We've got bacteria, fungi, protozoa, algae.
Oh, and don't forget about viruses.
Ah, yes, viruses. Those are a whole other story.
They're like the rebels of the microscopic world, aren't they?
Yeah.
I remember learning about bacteria and fungi in school, but viruses always seemed, I don't know, different.
They are different. I mean, they're not even really considered alive in the traditional sense.
Yeah, that's what's so weird about them.
Right. They're basically just genetic material, wrapped up in this protein coat. And they can only replicate, make more of themselves by, hijacking a living cell. It's kind of like they're these tiny little pirates commandeering a ship so they can make copies of themselves and spread.
Well, talk about a hostile takeover. And to think, those battles are happening all the time, even inside our own bodies.
All the time.
So you know how our source material mentions some hands-on activities. Have you ever looked at, pond water or soil under a microscope?
Oh, yeah. It's amazing, looking into another dimension, you see all these tiny creatures swimming around in these little universes of water droplets, or these intricate networks of fungi weaving through the soil. It's really something else.
It's wild to think about. And it's funny, right? Because we have things like bread mold, which we can practically see without a microscope. But then you've got these other microorganisms that are so small, you need some serious equipment to even see them.
That's right. It just goes to show the incredible range, even within the microscopic world.
And don't let their size fool you. These little guys, they're powerful.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, we're talking about organisms that can cause pandemics, but then they can also be responsible for, the delicious tang in yogurt.
Absolutely. It's that duality that makes them so fascinating. Yeah.
Totally. Okay, so let's get into it. The good, the bad, and the downright ugly of the microorganism world. When I think about the good side of microorganisms, food always comes to mind. It's kind of weird, but some of our favorite things, yogurt, bread, even chocolate, wouldn't exist without these, microscopic helpers,
Absolutely.
It's pretty wild.
Think about yogurt, right?
Yeah.
It's all thanks to those tiny little lactobacillus bacteria doing their thing in the milk. They ferment the lactose, and that's what gives us that tangy flavor, that creamy texture.
It's amazing, right, how these, invisible processes have shaped what we eat. And speaking of invisible processes, our course material talks about this cool experiment with yeast and sugar in a balloon.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
You mix it all up, and the balloon inflates.
I remember that from school.
Yeah, me too.
It's a classic.
It's like a science fair magic trick or something. But it's happening on such a small scale.
Right.
And here's the thing. That same process, that's what gives us fluffy bread.
Yeah.
And champagne.
Exactly. Fermentation is amazing. I mean, different microorganisms, different ingredients, and boom, you've got sourdough bread, kimchi, craft beers, all sorts of things.
Like a collaboration between humans and microbes.
I like that. A collaboration, even if we don't always realize it's happening.
Oddly. But of course, it's not all, delicious food and happy partnerships.
Right.
We've got to talk about the not-so-friendly microbes, too.
Right, the pathogens.
The ones that can make us sick.
Yeah, and they can spread so easily.
Oh, yeah.
Through the air, water, food, even just touching something. It's kind of scary how good they are at it.
And we've all been there, right? whether it's just a cold or food poisoning or something worse. Actually, the source material mentions this kid, Bujo, who gets food poisoning.
Mm,
And it's a good reminder that, food safety is important.
it really is.
Like, we got to take it seriously.
Understanding how these pathogens spread, how to stop them from growing, it's crucial.
Right.
Even something as simple as washing your hands really well, that can make a huge difference.
Huge. It's amazing, though, how, we've learned to fight back against these microscopic invaders. We've got vaccines, antibiotics. It's like an arms race.
It really is a constant back and forth.
And speaking of antibiotics, did you know that penicillin, the first one, that was discovered by accident?
That's right.
It's a crazy story. Alexander Fleming, he's a scientist, right?
Right.
And he's got this petri dish, and he notices this mold growing in it.
Uh-huh.
And get this, the mold was actually stopping the bacteria from growing.
Yep.
And that's how penicillin was born.
It revolutionized medicine.
Totally. But, even with all these advances, we got to be careful. Our source material talks about how overusing antibiotics, it's a problem.
Oh, yeah, big time.
It can create these like superbugs, these resistant strains of bacteria.
Right, because if we overuse antibiotics, the bacteria, they adapt. They can become resistant.
It's like we're giving them a fighting chance to outsmart us.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to use antibiotics responsibly and to follow your doctor's instructions.
Always listen to your doctor. But, while we're on the topic of fighting back against disease, we can't forget about vaccines.
Oh, yeah. Vaccines are amazing.
They're like these tiny little heroes.
Absolutely. They work with our immune system to protect us.
I remember getting vaccinated as a kid, and it was no big deal.
Right.
But it's amazing to think that those little shots were prepping my body to fight off some serious diseases.
That's exactly it. Vaccines, they're all about training our immune system to recognize and fight off specific pathogens.
It's like giving your body's defenses a sneak peek at the enemy so they're ready for battle.
Perfect analogy. And it's thanks to vaccines that we've been able to eradicate smallpox.
Wow.
And we're close to eradicating polio, too.
That's incredible. It's too bad there's so much misinformation about them these days.
Yeah, you're right.
But knowledge is power. Right.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've talked about the good, the bad, but there's this whole other group of microorganisms that we haven't even touched on yet.
Like, what? Give me an example.
The decomposers.
Mm.
They might not be as glamorous as, the yogurt-making bacteria,
Yeah.
but they are essential.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The decomposers, they're like the cleanup crew of the planet. They break down all that dead stuff, plants, animals, and they return those essential nutrients back to the soil.
They're like the unsung heroes of the ecosystem.
Right. They keep things in balance.
Speaking of balance, our source material talks about the nitrogen cycle.
Mhm.
And whoa, that one blew my mind.
Oh, yeah, the nitrogen cycle. It's amazing. It shows how interconnected everything is on Earth, and it all comes down to bacteria.
It's wild. There are these tiny little bacteria like rhizobium that can do this incredible thing.
Nitrogen fixation.
Yes, nitrogen fixation.
Yeah.
It's like they have this special language they use to talk to plants.
It's a symbiotic relationship, a mutually beneficial partnership. These nitrogen-fixing bacteria, they set up shop in these little nodules on the roots of certain plants, mostly legumes like beans and peas.
Like built-in apartments.
Exactly. And the bacteria, they get to work converting atmospheric nitrogen into a form that the plants can use.
So it's like a trade. The bacteria get a place to live, and the plants get the nitrogen they need.
Exactly. A perfect example of teamwork in nature.
I love it. But why is nitrogen fixation so important?
Well, nitrogen, it's essential for all life, right? It's a key ingredient in DNA, RNA, proteins, the building blocks of life.
Right. But I thought, nitrogen is everywhere.
It is. It makes up a huge part of our atmosphere. But most organisms, they can't use that nitrogen gas directly.
So that's where our nitrogen-fixing bacteria come in.
Wingo. They're like the chefs of the nitrogen world,
Right.
transforming that atmospheric nitrogen into something that the plants can actually use, and then everyone else benefits.
Wow. It's like this whole unseen world working behind the scenes to keep everything running. It really is, isn't it? Like you said, this whole unseen world just doing its thing, keeping everything balanced.
Exactly. And you know what blows my mind? Thinking about all the stuff we probably haven't even discovered yet. I mean, the world of microorganisms is just massive,
It's kind of humbling when you think about it.
Totally.
We like to think we're, the top dogs, but we're really just a part of this, giant web of life.
Yeah.
And these microorganisms, they're running the show in a lot of ways.
They really are. And their impact goes way beyond just the stuff we've talked about already. I mean, yeah, they're important for food and medicine and the environment, but their potential, it's almost limitless, you know?
Seriously, it's like they're this untapped resource just waiting for us to figure them out.
Yeah.
Who knows what kind of cool stuff we could come up with? New biofuels, maybe?
Mm.
Or even ways to use bacteria to, like, clean up pollution.
Oh, totally. They're already doing that, actually.
No way. Really?
Yeah. Researchers are using bacteria for bioremediation, like cleaning up oil spills and stuff like that.
That's amazing. It's like they're microscopic superheroes.
I know, right?
It just goes to show the smallest things can have the biggest impact.
Totally.
Well, I've got to say, this deep dive into the world of microorganisms has been amazing.
It really has.
From like yummy yogurt to life-saving antibiotics, and even their role in keeping the planet healthy.
Yeah.
Microorganisms are pretty incredible when you stop and think about them.
Absolutely.
And a big thank you to you, dear listener, for this awesome request. We hope you've enjoyed this deep dive into the unseen world of microorganisms. And, until next time, keep those questions coming and never stop exploring the world around you, even the parts you can't see.